Hello, and welcome back to Boring Stories for Sleep. Tonight, we're going to embark on a very gentle journey, quiet exploration into a world long past. A world built of stone and silence, of devotion and daily labor. Imagine yourself, if you will, drifting back in time, allowing your mind to settle as we step together into the hushed confines of a medieval monastery. Let your breath deepen, your shoulders relax, as we prepare to uncover the subtle rhythms of life within those ancient walls. We'll move slowly, observing the quiet details, feeling the echoes of lives lived with a gentle dedication, steadfast commitment to a path that might seem distant now, but was, for many, the very fabric of their existence. So find your most comfortable position. Close your eyes if you wish, and allow the steady cadence of our story to carry you softly into the night. Imagine yourself now, not just observing, but perhaps almost participating, a silent, unseen guest within the monastery walls as the first hint of dawn, or rather the hour before it begins to stir. The world outside is still deep in sleep. Perhaps a distant village slumbering under a blanket of stars, its inhabitants lost in dreams of harvests and hearth fires. But within these hallowed stones, a different kind of day is already beginning. The very air within the monastery feels thicker, heavier, imbued with the centuries of prayer and contemplation that have transpired here. It's a silence that isn't empty, but full, pregnant with the anticipation of sacred sound. The first call to prayer, known as vigils or matins, would pierce the profound silence of the pre-dawn darkness, not with a jarring clamor, but with the deep, slow tolling of a single bell, its resonant vibrations seeming to pass through the very stone. A summons that both gently wakes and firmly calls to spiritual duty. This was typically around 2 o'clock or 3 a.m., a time when the world feels most still, most vulnerable, most susceptible to quiet contemplation, when the veil between the temporal and the eternal seems thinnest. It is the hour when the mind, uncluttered by the day's demands, is most open to the divine. Picture the monk, rousing from his simple, straw-filled pallet in the dormitory. This bed, often a mere wooden frame with a mattress stuffed with straw or dried leaves, would offer little in the way of luxurious comfort. It was designed for rest, certainly, but not for indulgence, a physical embodiment of their vow of poverty and detachment. The air would be cold, often biting, especially during the long, unforgiving winter months when the stone walls radiated an inescapable chill. There would be no warmth from a roaring fire yet, just the persistent, ancient cold that seeped into the very stone of the building. A cold that seemed to hum with the weight of centuries, a constant, gentle penance in itself. His rough woolen habit, perhaps laid out neatly the night before, its folds testament to the care he took even in the dark, would be a familiar, comforting weight as he dressed. The coarse fabric, unsoftened by modern processes, scratchy against his skin, was a constant, subtle reminder of his vows of humility and detachment from worldly comforts. This simple garment, designed for warmth and modesty, was his uniform, binding him to his brothers and to his sacred calling. The only sounds would be the rustling of cloth as habits were donned, the soft shuffle of bare or sandaled feet on the cold flagstone floor, and the almost imperceptible breaths of his brothers stirring around him, each in their own private moment of awakening. There was a shared understanding and unspoken communion in this early rising, a collective act of will that began their day long before the sun even thought of appearing. This shared discipline, this voluntary breaking of sleep for prayer, was the bedrock of their communal life, a silent pledge renewed each pre-dawn hour, strengthening the bonds of their spiritual brotherhood. Moving with a practiced quietness, a grace born of countless repetitions, of a life lived in mindful motion, he would make his way through the dormitory. Imagine the faint earthy scent of old stone, damp and ancient, a geological perfume mingled with the dry, sweet fragrance of beeswax from candles, recently extinguished or yet to be lit, their waxy scent promising illumination. And perhaps a lingering hint of incense from the previous day's solemn services, a ghost of sanctity in the air that clung to the stone, a spiritual residue. The corridors, dark and narrow, would offer little light, save for the faintest shimmer of moonlight filtering through a high, unglazed window, creating pools of deepest shadow that shifted and danced with the monk's silent passage. Perhaps another monk, on his way to light the first candles in the church. might pass with a fleeting bowed head, a silent acknowledgement of their shared purpose, their parallel journeys in the dark, a brief communion without words. The rhythmic scraping of his sandals on the flagstone floor, worn smooth by generations of monks, each footfall polishing the stone a little further, would be one of the few sounds breaking the profound stillness, a gentle counterpoint to the absolute silence. Each step was unhurried, deliberate, part of a long-established pattern, a walking meditation in itself, each step a prayer. As they gathered in the monastic church, or the abbey church, a magnificent edifice often dwarfing the surrounding buildings, testament to God's glory, the vast echoing space would slowly begin to shed its deepest shadows. A few flickering oil lamps, their small fragile flames casting a warm, unsteady glow that made the shadows dance, or more commonly beeswax candles would be carefully lit. One by one, their small lights pushing back the encroaching darkness, creating long dancing shadows on the high vaulted ceilings and the intricate carvings of the choir stalls. The air would still be cold, carrying a crisp, almost sacred quality, like the very breath of ancient stone, purified by the cold. The monks would take their places, each in his accustomed stall, a place he knew intimately. Where countless hours had been spent in prayer and contemplation, the dark would polish smooth by the touch of hands over centuries. Each indentation, a silent record of devotion. The scent of cold stone and fresh candle wax would fill the air, creating an atmosphere of profound reverence, a sanctuary against the night. The very architecture of the church, with its soaring arches and intricate details, was designed to elevate the mind, to draw the gaze upwards towards heaven, reminding them of the divine presence that enveloped them. The service of vigils would commence. Imagine the deep, resonant tones of Gregorian chant beginning to fill the vast space. A sound designed not for performance or entertainment, but for devotion, for lifting the spirit, for dissolving the self into something greater. A communal voice rising in perfect harmony. The words, often from the Psalms, ancient Hebrew poetry, expressions of lament, praise, and supplication, would be recited or sung in Latin, a language that bound them to a tradition stretching back centuries, connecting them to a global community of faith, transcending the boundaries of time and place. There would be readings from Scripture, from the fathers of the church, voices echoing across time, their wisdom brought forth from ancient scrolls and manuscripts carefully preserved in the scriptorium, offering guidance and insight. D's. Readings would be punctuated by periods of profound silent reflection, where each monk would internalize the words, allowing them to seep into the core of his being, turning them over in his mind and heart, seeking personal meaning and divine illumination. This was not a hurried affair. It was a slow, deliberate unfolding of prayer, sometimes lasting for 2 or 3 hours, a vigil of the soul in the deep of night, a dedicated offering of the earliest hours to God. The rhythm of their lives, you see, was deeply intertwined with these hours. These repeated cycles of prayer that punctuated the day and night, marking the passage of time not by minutes or economic demands, but by spiritual milestones, by the unwavering pulse of devotion. Following vigils, as a hint of gray might be just beginning to appear in the eastern sky, a mere suggestion of light on the horizon, a subtle brightening that promised the dawn, came loads, the morning prayer. This often coincided with the true break of day, and as the chanting continued, a subtle shift in the light might be perceived, a gentle promise of the new day filtering through the high, narrow windows, painting the rough stone with nascent hues of rose and pearl, transforming the interior with ethereal light. The prayers of lauds would be a thanksgiving for the new day, a blessing on the light returning to the world, a renewal of spirit as creation itself awakened, stirring from its slumber. The monks' voices, perhaps a little clearer now, a little more robust, strengthened by the earlier devotion and the emerging light, would fill the church with a sense of quiet hope and renewed dedication. A collective breath taken before the day's labors, a reaffirmation of their commitment to serve in the light. After lauds, there would usually be a brief period for personal prayer or study before the first communal meal of the day. This was often a time for Lectio Divina, or sacred reading, where a monk would slowly and meditatively read a passage of Scripture, not for academic study, but to allow its meaning to sink deeply into his heart and mind. Chewing on the words like spiritual sustenance, letting them nourish his inner life. Imagine him seated in the cloister, a covered walkway surrounding a central courtyard, perhaps a perfectly manicured garden in its center. A miniature paradise, carefully tended. Even at this early hour, the cloister would offer a sheltered space, its elegant arches framing the emerging light of dawn, protecting him from any lingering chill, providing a quiet space for contemplation. The air might carry the fresh scent of damp earth, of dew on ancient stone, or the delicate fragrance of herbs beginning to awaken in the garden. Rosemary, lavender, thyme. Their scents carried on the gentle morning breeze, symphony of natural aromas. The world outside the cloister might be stirring, with the faint sounds of distant animals or the preparations of lay brothers, but within these arcades, a profound peace reigned, an echo of paradise, a haven for the soul. The morning meal, known as prandium or collation, depending on the time of year and the specific rule observed, would be a simple affair, stark in its austerity, yet deeply nourishing. Often it would consist of bread, perhaps coarse and dark, baked within the monastery's own walls, its crust thick, its interior dense and wholesome, providing slow-releasing energy. This would be accompanied by some ale or water, the ale often weak, more for hydration and a touch of flavor than for intoxication. A safe drink in an age where water quality was often dubious. In some seasons, cheese, hard and salty, perhaps made from the milk of the monastery's own cows or goats. Or humble vegetables like boiled cabbage or lentils might be added. Meat was a rare luxury, often reserved only for the sick, the very old, or for special, grand feast days. Its absence, a constant reminder of their vow of poverty and self-denial, a discipline for the body as well as the soul. This was not a meal for enjoyment in the modern sense, but for sustenance, for fueling the body for the demanding day ahead, means to an end, not an end in itself. Imagine the monks gathered in the refectory, a large, austere dining hall with long wooden tables and benches, unadorned and functional. They would eat in silence, a profound quiet broken only by the designated reader who would read aloud from scripture or a spiritual text. His voice a steady drone, carrying the words to each monk, allowing them to absorb sacred teachings even while they ate. This practice was meant to nourish not only the body, but also the soul, preventing idle chatter, fostering a spirit of contemplation even during mundane activities. The scrape of wooden bowls on the table, the tearing of bread, the quiet sips of drink, these would be the only sounds, punctuated by the steady, soothing voice of the reader, the words carrying spiritual lessons into their receptive minds, a constant reminder of their higher purpose. After the morning meal, and a period for cleaning the refectory, where each monk might take a turn with broom and cloth, ensuring the space was left immaculate for the next sitting, a communal effort to maintain order and cleanliness, the monks would move to their assigned duties or labors. This was the practical, physical work that kept the monastery running, ensuring its self-sufficiency, and often contributed to the wider community through charity or the provision of goods, making the monastery a vital part of the local economy and social structure. The range of tasks was vast and varied, reflecting the diverse skills and vocations within the monastic community, from the most intellectual to the most physically demanding. Some monks would be tending the monastery gardens, cultivating vegetables and medicinal herbs, a critical task for both food and healing, providing for the health and sustenance of the community. Imagine the vibrant green of new growth, the earthy scent of rosemary, mint, and thyme mingling with the damp soil. The feeling of the sun beginning to warm the back as they carefully weeded rows or harvested plump cabbages and fragrant basil. The gentle rustle of leaves, the distant buzz of a bee, the chirping of unseen birds. These would be the quiet, natural sounds of their dedicated labor, a communion with nature as a reflection of God's creation. Others might be found in the scriptorium, the copying room. This was often one of the warmest rooms in the monastery, sometimes even having a small brazier for warmth. Its glow, comforting in the often chilly stone edifice. As the work of copying manuscripts required delicate hands and focused, unwavering attention, a task that could not be rushed, imagine the faint, rhythmic scratching of a quill on parchment, a meticulous sound of diligent preservation, each stroke bringing forth the words of ancient wisdom. The rich, earthy smell of ink mixed from gallnuts and lampblack, and the subtle scent of aged vellum or parchment prepared from animal hides would fill the air. A distinctive aroma of scholarship and artistry. The intricate artistry of illuminated manuscripts, with their vibrant colors, crimson, ultramarine, emerald, painstakingly ground from precious minerals, and shimmering gold leaf applied with the utmost precision, would be meticulously created in this quiet, sacred space. Each stroke of the pen, each careful mixing of pigments, each detailed drawing of a biblical scene or an ornate initial was an act of profound devotion, preserving knowledge and beauty for future generations, ensuring the continuity of learning in a world often beset by chaos. The rhythm of their lives for these scribes was found in the careful, deliberate movements of their hands, the steady concentration on the text before them, a meditation in motion, a prayer of the hands and eyes. Still others would be engaged in more practical crafts, brewing ale in vast vats, the air thick with the heady scent of malt and yeast, the bubbling and frothing a testament to transformation, baking bread in the monastery's own enormous stone ovens, the aroma of fresh-baked bread, warm and inviting, wafting through the corridors, a comforting scent of sustenance, working in the monastery's infirmary, carefully preparing herbal remedies and poultices, tending to the sick and frail with compassion and ancient knowledge, or managing the monastery's vast estates, overseeing agricultural work in the fields beyond the immediate walls, interacting with lay brothers and tenant farmers, ensuring the monastery's economic viability. The monastery was often a self-sufficient community, small, intricate world unto itself, a vibrant hub of activity and prayer, a microcosm of society. There would be a stable for horses and mules, essential for transport and farm work, perhaps a forge for metalwork, its clang muted by thick stone walls, creating tools and repairs, a carpentry shop for repairs and construction of furniture and buildings. Each monk, according to his abilities and the needs of the community, would contribute his unique talents, fulfilling his role within the communal body. This physical labor, too, was seen as a form of prayer, a way to serve God and their brothers, a practical expression of their spiritual commitment. It was a constant struggle against idleness, a belief that honest, humble work kept both body and soul in good order, preventing the mind from wandering into temptation and fostering a deep sense of purpose. Throughout the morning, these periods of work would be interspersed with more calls to prayer, weaving the spiritual into the very fabric of their daily existence, ensuring that work never became an end in itself, but always served a higher purpose. Terce at mid-morning around 9 a.m. would break the work with another short service of psalms and readings, a brief respite for spiritual refreshment, a moment to recenter. Then sext at midday around 12 p.m. and none in the mid-afternoon around 3 p.m. would continue this gentle rhythm, ensuring that no hour passed without a remembrance of their spiritual purpose, a conscious return to the heart of their vows, a periodic renewal of their dedication. Each tolling of the bell, slow and resonant, its deep sound vibrating through the air, carried by the wind across the fields and through the workshops, would be a reminder, a gentle summons to refocus, to return to the heart of their vows, a steady, unhurried pulse for the entire community, echoing across the fields and through the workshops, a constant, comforting presence. Again in silence, accompanied by reading. This would be a more substantial meal than the early morning collation, but still simple and often vegetarian, reflecting the monastic diet. Think of thick, hearty vegetable stews, brimming with root vegetables like carrots, parsnips, and turnips, and pulses like beans and peas, providing essential protein and warmth. More of that dense, wholesome bread would be present, perhaps some lentils or peas, cooked simply. The food was nourishing, designed to sustain them through their demanding schedule, to provide the energy for their labors, but not to indulge the senses. The emphasis was always on moderation, on detachment from worldly pleasures, even those as basic as food, a discipline of the palate as much as of the spirit, a constant exercise in self-control. As the afternoon began to wane, and the light outside softened, turning golden and diffused, casting long, gentle shadows, The work period would gradually draw to a close. There might be a period for reading in the cloister again, the fading light perfect for quiet contemplation, the peace of the garden deepening. Or perhaps a time for confession and spiritual direction with the abbot or a senior monk. It's a chance to unburden the soul and seek guidance to address any spiritual struggles. The evening prayers, known as vespers, would be celebrated as dusk began to fall. Painting the sky with hues of orange and purple, a glorious display of God's creation. Imagine the soft, fading light filtering through the stained glass windows. If the monastery was grand enough to possess them, casting muted, jewel-toned colors, sapphire, ruby, amethyst, across the ancient stone floor, transforming the church into a kaleidoscope of ethereal light, a final, beautiful blessing on the day. The familiar chants would again fill the church, perhaps with a slightly more reflective, even melancholic tone as the day drew to its close, lament for the passing light, a preparation for the night. The monks would sing of the setting sun, of the coming night, and of their hope in the everlasting light. A beacon in the encroaching darkness, a prayer for spiritual illumination. After Vespers, there might be a light supper. If a second meal was permitted by the monastic rule, often even simpler than the morning collation, a final frugal repast, perhaps a piece of fruit and a small portion of bread. Then came the final, and perhaps most solemn, service of the day. Compline. This was the night prayer, a short, beautiful service of prayers for protection during the night, an examination of conscience. A moment to review the day's thoughts and deeds, seeking forgiveness and grace, and a final farewell to the light of day. Imagine the church now almost entirely dark, lit only by a few candles, their flames dancing softly, creating a sense of profound intimacy and quiet surrender. The shadows deepening around them, encompassing them in a sacred embrace. The monks would sing the ancient hymn Salva nos Domini, save us, O Lord, while we are awake, and protect us while we sleep, that we may watch with Christ and rest in peace. The silence that followed Compline was absolute, known as the Great Silence. A profound stillness that would last until the first bell for vigils in the deep of the next pre-dawn. It was a silence that wrapped around them. A spiritual cocoon, inviting deep rest and a final communion with the divine before sleep, claimed them. Ready to begin the cycle anew. From the end of Compline until the first service of vigils the next morning, no speaking was permitted among the monks, except in cases of absolute necessity, a shared code of quietude known as the Great Silence. This was a time for profound internal reflection, for stillness of mind, for a deepening of their spiritual journey, a return to the inner sanctuary of the soul. Imagine the monk making his way back through the now utterly dark corridors to the dormitory. His path illuminated only by the faint glow of the moon filtering through high, unglazed windows, or by the light of faith within. Guided by memory and the familiar contours of the ancient stone, the cold would have deepened again, seeping into the very bedrock of the monastery. A pervasive chill that spoke of the earth itself. But there was a quiet comfort in the absolute silence. In the shared understanding that each brother was also retreating into his own inner world, preparing for the restorative sleep that would allow him to begin the cycle anew. It was a silence that was not empty, but full, vibrating with the collective prayers and meditations of the day, a sacred hum. He would lie down on his simple pallet, perhaps pulling the rough woolen blanket more tightly around him, finding what small warmth he could against the pervasive chill, an acceptance of physical austerity as part of his spiritual discipline. The sounds of the night would be minimal, perhaps the distant hoot of an owl echoing through the valley, a haunting, timeless sound. The soft rustle of wind around the stone walls, like a whispered prayer. The gentle breathing of his fellow monks, a collective rhythm of rest, a symphony of slumber in the dark. There would be no clocks ticking with their insistent modern measurement of time, no distant traffic roaring, no electric hum, no artificial distractions to pull the mind from its center. Only the profound, ancient silence, punctuated by the steady, comforting beating of his own heart, and perhaps the quiet thoughts of the day. Of the prayers offered, the work completed, the small struggles overcome, the moments of grace perceived. The rhythm of their lives, you see, was one of constant struggle, a struggle against the self, against distraction, against idleness, always striving towards a higher purpose, a profound union with the divine, a continuous refinement of the soul. And so the day would end as it began, in darkness and silence, only to be renewed in the early hours before dawn. A perpetual cycle of spiritual awakening and humble rest. This was the life within medieval monastery walls, a life of enduring routine, a physical labor, of deep spiritual devotion, and of an almost profound simplicity that bordered on austerity. The clothes were rough, made of undyed wool or coarse linen, unadorned and practical, designed for function and modesty, never for display. The food was plain, but nourishing, designed for sustenance, not pleasure. A means to fuel the body for service, not to indulge the senses. The days were long, stretching from pre-dawn darkness to late evening gloom, punctuated by the slow, deliberate tolling of bells, their sound carrying through the stillness, the steady drone of Gregorian chant, and the quiet, focused sounds of work and contemplation. Time within these walls passed differently. It was not measured by minutes and hours in the frantic, linear way we understand it today, but by the cycles of prayer, the changing seasons, and the slow, deliberate unfolding of a life dedicated to a higher calling. It was a constant struggle, yes, a continuous effort of self-mastery, a battle against the worldly self, but also a constant seeking, a quiet journey inwards. Sustained by the steadfast rhythms they embraced, a profound harmony of body and soul, a slow, gentle blossoming of spiritual awareness. As we gently drift from this detailed immersion into their daily routines, let us carry with us the image of those quiet, resolute individuals. For within these same unyielding walls, not just daily life unfolded in its precise, unhurried manner, but also the lives of remarkable individuals. Each monk, in his own way, left a subtle, often unrecorded mark on the tapestry of history, a quiet thread woven into the grand design. These were men who, despite the seeming uniformity of their days, possessed unique stories, quiet struggles, sometimes profound impacts that rippled far beyond their cloistered existence. We'll explore some of these individual lives and events in our next gentle segment as we continue our quiet journey through the medieval monastery. Seeking out the human heart beating beneath the stone in silence, we continue our quiet journey into the heart of a medieval monastery. In our last segment, we gently immersed ourselves in the intricate, unhurried rhythms of daily life within those ancient walls, observing the monks from pre-dawn vigils to the deep silence of Compline. We touched upon the shared existence, the collective dedication that shaped their days and nights, the very breath of their communal life. Now, as the soft light of our imagined past continues to illuminate these quiet spaces, we'll narrow our focus a little, seeking to understand a single life that moved within those very rhythms. A life that, in its own gentle way, reflects the profound contributions and subtle challenges of monastic existence. A life that, though seemingly small, held immense purpose. Imagine yourself now, not simply observing the collective, the silent throng of brothers, but quietly shadowing one such individual. A man whose life, though perhaps not widely celebrated in the grand annals of history or sung by wandering minstrels, was deeply significant within the microcosm of his monastic world. Let us turn our attention to the venerable Brother Thomas. He was not an abbot, burdened with the immense administrative and spiritual responsibilities of leading the community, or a saint canonized by the wider church, known for miracles or grand theological pronouncements, but rather a simple, dedicated monk. A librarian and scribe, within a Benedictine abbey nestled in the rolling hills of what is now northern France. Sometime in the late 12th century, its story, like so many others, is largely unwritten, swallowed by the sands of time. But through the fragments of historical record and the quiet logic of monastic life, we can gently reconstruct the essence of his existence, breathing life into a forgotten narrative. Brother Thomas's journey to the monastery began not with a dramatic vision or a sudden, fervent conversion, the kind of spiritual awakening that becomes legend, but with a quieter, more practical path, common to many in his era. He was born into a family of modest means, perhaps small landowners tilling their ancestral fields or skilled artisans in a nearby village, their hands accustomed to the honest labor of their craft. It was a family who perhaps saw the monastic life not only as a path to spiritual salvation for their son, as a guarantee of prayers for the family's departed souls and living members, but also as a path to intellectual fulfillment and a stable, respected position for a bright son in a world of limited opportunities. From an early age, it became clear that young Thomas possessed a keen mind and a gentle disposition, a child more inclined to thoughtful observation than boisterous play, spending hours perhaps watching the flight of birds circle against the sky, or sketching with charcoal on spare scraps of wood, his mind already drawn to patterns and forms. In an age when literacy was a rare and precious gift, often confined to the clergy and a select few nobles, Thomas's ability to read and write, nurtured by a local parish priest who recognized his potential and perhaps tutored him in the rudiments of Latin, marked him as different, as one destined for more than the plow or the forge. It was a skill that, when recognized, naturally drew him towards the cloistered life. A life where books and learning were not just tolerated, but revered, considered sacred pathways to God's wisdom. So, in his late teens, with a quiet solemnity and a deep sense of purpose, a mixture of youthful idealism and practical commitment, Thomas made his vows, laying aside his secular name and embracing the monastic habit. Imagine the young man standing before the abbot and his new brothers, the flickering candlelight illuminating their serious, kind faces, casting long, wavering shadows. The weight of the rough woolen cloth, perhaps scratchy at first against his skin, was a tangible symbol of his new commitment, a physical manifestation of his renunciation of the world and its fleeting pleasures. The world outside, with its bustling markets, its feudal lords and their complex allegiances, its intermittent wars, and its ever-present dangers. Its seasonal rhythms of feast and famine receded, replaced by the reassuring, predictable, and deeply spiritual structure of the Rule of Saint Benedict. This ancient text, written centuries before, was the foundation of the rhythm of their lives. A detailed guide for communal living, prayer, and work, designed to foster humility, obedience, and spiritual growth, a blueprint for an entire way of life, a haven of order in a often chaotic world. Once within the monastery, Brother Thomas's talents were quickly recognized. His legible hand, precise and elegant, his immense patience, the quiet intensity of his focus, and his profound love for the written word destined him for the scriptorium, the beating heart of intellectual life in the monastery. This was his sacred space, a quiet room, often unheated, where the profound silence was broken only by the delicate, rhythmic scratch of quills on parchment and the soft rustle of pages being turned. Sounds that formed a unique and soothing symphony of scholarly endeavor. Imagine him sitting at his carrel, a small, individual workspace, almost a desk booth, designed for solitude and concentration, bathed in the natural light that streamed through a narrow, high window, carefully designed to maximize the precious daylight hours, for artificial light was dim and costly. Air would often be cool, even damp, carrying the unique, almost sweet scent of vellum-prepared animal skin, the rich, earthy aroma of ink made from oak galls and iron salts, its darkness speaking of permanence, and the subtle, clean scent of beeswax used to polish wooden furniture and bind books, a constant, comforting presence. His days were, of course, punctuated by the canonical hours, the regular calls to prayer that we explored in our last segment, a constant ebb and flow of communal devotion, an anchor for his spiritual life. But in between vigils and lauds, terce and sext, nun and vespers, his primary responsibility lay with the monastery's precious collection of books. In the medieval world, monasteries were often the sole custodians of knowledge, the flickering lamps that kept learning alive during tumultuous times, preserving texts that might otherwise have been lost to war, neglect, or the simple passage of time. They preserved not only scripture and theological texts, the bedrock of their faith, the very words of God, but also classical Greek and Roman works, medical treatises that offered healing knowledge, historical chronicles recording the march of human events, and even early scientific observations, acting as vital bridges between ancient wisdom and future enlightenment, silent guardians of human thought. Brother Thomas's daily responsibilities as a librarius were varied and meticulously performed, each task imbued with a sense of sacred duty. His first duty, and perhaps the one that brought him the most quiet satisfaction, was the copying of texts. Imagine him meticulously laying out a sheet of vellum, smoothed and prepared, its surface cool and responsive, painstakingly ruling lines with a stylus and lead point to ensure neat, even script, a perfect scaffold for the words to come, each line a promise of order. Then, with a carefully sharpened quill, perhaps from a goose feather, its tip finely split. Dipped into a small pot of dark ink, he would begin the slow, deliberate process of transcribing. Each letter, each word, was an act of meditation. A focused engagement with the text, a prayer in ink, a spiritual exercise in concentration and precision. He would copy psalters, liturgical books for the divine office, theological commentaries by revered church fathers, their wisdom passed down through generations. And sometimes, if the monastery was particularly wealthy or had a special focus, a classical text from antiquity, allowing the wisdom of pagan philosophers like Aristotle or Plato to coexist peacefully with Christian dogma, enriching the intellectual tapestry of the abbey. This was not a hurried task. A single manuscript could take months, even years, to complete. Each page a testament to unwavering patience and dedication, a lifetime's work captured in bound vellum. The rhythm of his life, for long stretches, was the rhythm of his breathing. The gentle scratch of his quill, and the slow, steady progression of words appearing on the page. Like drops of water carving a path through stone, gradually revealing an entire universe of thought. Beyond copying, he was also responsible for the meticulous care and organization of the existing collection. Books were rare and expensive treasures, each one a significant investment of time, resources, and skill, often worth more than an entire farm. Imagine him carefully mending a torn page, using fine thread and a steady hand, almost like a surgeon, ensuring the integrity of the delicate vellum, a repair that required both skill and reverence. He might rebind a worn volume, crafting new covers from sturdy oak boards and covering them with tanned leather, perhaps embossed with a simple monastic seal, a cross, a lamb, or a stylized initial, a mark of ownership and sanctity. He would also be responsible for cataloging the books, often using simple lists or inventories on parchment, noting the author, title, and where each precious volume was stored. Perhaps chained to a reading desk to prevent theft and ensure it stayed in its designated place, or carefully placed in a wooden chest. Protected from light and damp, a silent guardian of knowledge. The constant struggle for Brother Thomas would be against the ravages of time, the insidious dampness that warped pages and encouraged mold, the occasional nibbling mouse that saw valuable parchment as a simple meal, ensuring the survival of these invaluable repositories of wisdom for future generations, a quiet, ongoing battle against decay. Brother Thomas also played a role in the monastery's interaction with the wider medieval world, albeit a quiet and understated one, a gentle bridge between the cloister and the bustling world beyond its walls. Sometimes, scholars or visiting clerics from other abbeys, or even distant universities in burgeoning cities like Paris or Bologna, would seek access to the monastery's library, drawn by its reputation for possessing a unique text, a rare commentary, or a particularly fine collection of classical works, its fame spreading by word of mouth among the learned. Imagine Brother Thomas, with his quiet dignity and deep knowledge of the collection, his humility masking a vast intellect, greeting such a visitor, perhaps a bustling, worldly academic, with hurried questions, guiding them through the hushed library, and carefully retrieving the requested volume, handling it with reverence, aware of its profound value. In such moments, the monastery, through its librarian, served as a vital intellectual hub, a place where knowledge was preserved, exchanged, and kept alive, forming invisible threads of connection across the medieval landscape, linking scholars and thinkers across vast distances. His gentle impact on the surrounding community extended to these intellectual exchanges, fostering a network of learning that spanned beyond the monastery walls, radiating outwards like ripples in a pond, touching countless unseen lives. His writings, if he produced any original works, would likely have been annotations in the margins of texts he copied, offering small insights or corrections, or perhaps a simple chronicle of local events kept for the monastery's archives, noting important births, deaths, visitations, or significant harvests. Practical records for the community. These were not works intended for fame or wide publication, but rather for the practical needs of his community, or as humble acts of personal devotion and reflection, integral to the communal memory and the monastery's own quiet history. He embodied the quiet, scholarly contribution of many monks, whose patient and diligent efforts, though often unsung and anonymous, were fundamental to the preservation of Western thought during the tumultuous Middle Ages, ensuring that the flame of learning never entirely died. The challenges Brother Thomas faced were not those of dramatic conflict, of battles or political intrigue, of grand sweeping narratives, but rather the subtle, persistent struggles inherent in monastic life, the daily tests of endurance and faith, the cold of the scriptorium in winter, so intense that ink could freeze in the pot, forcing him to work by the dim, precious light of a candle that warmed only a small circle. The strain on his eyes from working by flickering candlelight during the short, dark days, the occasional frustrations of a difficult, poorly written text from which to copy, or a faulty, rebellious quill that refused to hold its point. These were his daily trials. His small acts of self-mastery, his quiet battles. There was also the constant struggle against distractions. The ever-present call to maintain focus, to keep his mind on the spiritual purpose of his work, even as his hands performed the meticulous physical tasks. A constant battle against the wandering mind. The rhythm of their lives, you see, demanded a profound inner discipline, a constant striving for humility and obedience amidst the quiet routine, continuous act of surrender and dedication, transforming mundane tasks into acts of prayer. As he grew older, Brother Thomas would have become a venerated figure within his community, a repository of knowledge and a living example of steadfast dedication and quiet wisdom, his presence a comforting, steadying force. Younger monks, aspiring to similar roles in the scriptorium, would have looked to him for guidance, learning not just the craft of copying and binding, but also the spirit of quiet service and devotion it embodied, soaking up his wisdom like parched earth. His life spent entirely within those monastery walls was a testament to the enduring power of routine, of devotion, and of the profound, often unseen impact of individuals who chose a path of quiet contemplation and diligent labor. His legacy was not one of grand monuments or sweeping historical narratives, but of carefully preserved manuscripts, of wisdom faithfully transcribed, page by patient page, and of a life lived in quiet service, a vital, invisible thread in the rich tapestry of the medieval world. Holding it together with silent strength, imagine him in his later years, his hands perhaps a little arthritic, gnawed by years of holding a quill, his eyes not as sharp as they once were, requiring him to peer closely at the vellum, but his spirit undimmed. His mind still clear and focused, filled with the wisdom of countless texts. He would still be found in the scriptorium, perhaps overseeing younger scribes, guiding their hands and minds with gentle corrections, or perhaps simply sitting in quiet contemplation, a silent guardian of the knowledge around him. The familiar scent of parchment and ink a comforting, almost sacred presence, the very air breathing with history. The rhythm of their lives, the gentle tolling of the bells, the whispered prayers, the quiet work, it all continued, a constant, reassuring hum beneath the surface of history. A timeless melody of devotion, stretching back into the past and reaching forward to the future. As we gently leave Brother Thomas in his quiet scriptorium, we begin to sense that these monastery walls, more than just housing daily routines and the lives of dedicated individuals, also hold secrets, stories, and tangible echoes of the past that still speak to us today. The very stones beneath our imagined feet worn smooth by generations of monks. The artifacts they carefully preserved and used and the mysteries they subtly hint at invite us to delve deeper. In our next segment, we will gently turn our attention to these material remnants, to the archaeology, the cultural artifacts, and the enduring mysteries connected to these fascinating enclaves, allowing the physical world of the monastery to tell its own quiet story. Let the quiet image of Brother Thomas and his life of serene scholarship gently fade, as we prepare to uncover the tangible legacies left behind by these remarkable communities, seeking out the physical whispers of history. Then there are the more subtle, almost whispered mysteries that lie within the very fabric of the monastery itself. Hidden manuscripts, In an age before printing, every book was a precious, hand-copied artifact. A unique creation born of immense labor and devotion, often a lifetime's work. While many were carefully cataloged and stored in the scriptorium, meticulously preserved for the common good, sometimes texts were deliberately concealed, tucked away from the prying eyes of the world or the destructive forces that threaten knowledge. Perhaps they were hidden for safekeeping during times of war or unrest, secreted away from invading armies, destructive fires, or the zealous scrutiny of external authorities who might deem their content heretical or dangerous, or perhaps for reasons known only to the individual monk who hid them. A private theological speculation, a controversial commentary on a forgotten scripture, a forbidden text that challenged established dogma, or a personal chronicle deemed too intimate, too revealing for the public library, a quiet act of intellectual courage. Imagine the faint tremor of discovery, not with a loud clang or a dramatic crash, but a soft thud, a loose stone in a monastic library wall, perhaps dislodged by the relentless creep of time, the subtle shifts of the ancient edifice revealing a small, forgotten recess, hidden for centuries, a secret compartment in the heart of knowledge. Within it, not gold or jewels, the fleeting treasures of the world, but a bundle of brittle parchment, carefully wrapped in ancient faded linen cloth. Tied with a simple, preserved cord made of hemp or leather, it's not still intact. A collection of personal letters from a revered abbot, offering intimate glimpses into his spiritual struggles and guidance. A controversial commentary on a forgotten scripture that dared to question prevailing interpretations. Or even a local chronicle, meticulously penned but never officially added to the monastery's main collection, offering a unique, unfiltered perspective on historical events, free from official censorship. These are not dramatic tales of espionage or grand conspiracies, but quiet glimpses into individual acts of preservation, of personal dedication to knowledge beyond the communal scope, a silent rebellion against oblivion, a whisper of individuality within the collective. The faint, sweet scent of aged paper, a dry, almost ethereal fragrance. The delicate crackle of the parchment as it is gently unfurled, its surface still smooth, revealing faded, sepia-toned ink that speaks of centuries past. These are the sensory details of such a quiet, profound revelation, a whisper from the past, a hand reaching across time. Another fascinating aspect, intimately connected to the daily rhythm of the monks and their very survival, lies in the monastic gardens. We've spoken of the herb garden, a source of sustenance and simple medicine. It's providing both food for the refectory and remedies for the infirmary, essential for the community's health. But these gardens were often far more than just practical spaces. They were living libraries of knowledge carefully cultivated over generations, a testament to botanical wisdom passed down through time. Imagine the abbot, perhaps himself knowledgeable in the healing properties of plants passed down through ancient texts and oral tradition. His wisdom gleaned from careful study and practical application, supervising a younger monk as they carefully tend to rows of lavender, prized for its calming properties and fragrant oil, valerian for sleep, its earthy roots a powerful sedative, its chamomile for soothing ailments of the stomach and nerves, comfrey for healing wounds, its broad leaves offering relief. The air would be thick with their combined fragrances, a soothing blend of earthy and sweet, pungent and delicate. A natural pharmacy in bloom, a haven for bees and other creatures. The knowledge of which plant treated which ailment, how to prepare it, and when to harvest it was not simply practical. It was often viewed as a gift from God, to be carefully stewarded and passed on, a sacred science, a tangible expression of divine care. Archaeology can also reveal the subtle structure of these gardens. Even after centuries of disuse and the passage of nature reclaiming its own, faint outlines of raised beds, once meticulously tended, the remnants of ancient irrigation channels designed to capture precious rainwater and distribute it efficiently, or the presence of specific pollen types in the soil, preserved through time in the layers of earth, can paint a vivid picture of what was grown there centuries ago. A ghostly blueprint of their botanical world, a silent record of their labors. These discoveries are not loud or immediate. They require patience and careful interpretation, a quiet dialogue between the present and the past, piecing together fragments to form a coherent story. They remind us that the physical environment of the monastery was not static. It was a living, breathing entity, constantly shaped by human hands and in turn shaping the rhythm of their lives. A constant struggle, yes, against weeds that threatened to choke out precious crops, against pests that sought to devour their harvest, against the unpredictable whims of nature. Drought, flood, frost, but also a constant cultivation, a gentle partnership with the earth itself. A profound act of creation and sustenance, a deep respect for the land that fed them.
The physical remnants, there are the cultural artifacts, often preserved with painstaking care within the monastery walls, shining examples of human artistry and devotion that transcend mere utility. These might be beautifully illuminated chalices used for the Eucharist, crafted from gleaming silver and gold.
Perhaps studied with precious gems, rubies, emeralds, sapphires, catching the light in the dimly lit church, each sparkle a reflection of divine glory. Or intricately carved reliquaries, holding the supposed bones or relics of saints. Elaborate miniature architectural masterpieces designed to honor the holy, their delicate filigree and sculptural details inspiring awe. Or elaborately embroidered vestments worn by the abbot during high feast days, heavy with silk gold thread. And intricate symbolic patterns depicting biblical scenes or holy symbols, each stitch a prayer. Imagine holding one of these objects, feeling the cool weight of the silver or gold, the smooth polish of centuries, tracing the delicate patterns woven into the fabric with your fingertips, feeling the luxurious texture of ancient silk still vibrant after hundreds of years. Each item tells a story, not of grand battles or royal decrees, but of devotion, of skilled craftsmanship honed over years, of the deep artistic expression of faith, and of the profound spiritual meaning attached to everyday objects when used in sacred ritual, elevating the mundane to the sacred. The quiet glow of polished metal, reflecting the gentle candlelight, the soft, luxurious texture of ancient silk, still vibrant after centuries. These are the sensory links to a past imbued with a deep reverence for the sacred and the beautiful, a tangible connection to the spiritual aspirations of those who crafted and used them. Sometimes the mystery is simply the quiet, persistent question of how such grand, imposing structures were built in an age without modern machinery. Without the roaring engines and towering cranes of today, imagine the sheer human effort involved in quarrying tons of stone from distant hillsides. The echoing sound of picks and hammers against rock, transporting it by ox cart or barge, a slow, arduous journey over rough terrain. And then carefully hoisting and shaping each massive block into place, forming the soaring arches and massive, load-bearing walls of the Abbey Church, a testament to engineering skill and raw strength. This was not the work of a few years, but often of generations, a continuous project that spanned the lives of many monks and master masons, each contributing their skill and labor to a vision that would outlast them all, a legacy built in stone. The faint echoes of hammers striking chisels, carving intricate details, the rhythmic chants of workers pulling on ropes and levers, coordinating their efforts, the creak of wooden scaffolding reaching to impossible heights. These are the imagined sounds of this monumental, collective effort, a symphony of human will. It speaks to a profound patience, a long-term vision, and a deep, enduring faith that extends far beyond individual lifespans. Believing in the eternal nature of their work, building for God and for eternity. It was a constant struggle, yes, against gravity, against the stubbornness of stone, against fatigue and the relentless march of time. But a struggle undertaken with a deep faith in the enduring nature of their work and its ultimate purpose, a monument to their devotion. These subtle mysteries, the quiet revelations of archaeology, and the tangible presence of cultural artifacts, all serve to deepen our understanding of monastic life. They remind us that the monastery was not just a place of abstract spiritual devotion, a realm removed from reality and human concerns, but a very real, very physical space intimately connected to the earth, to human ingenuity, and to the careful preservation of both knowledge and sacred objects, a bridge between the spiritual and the material, where heaven and earth met in stone and silence. Now, as we gently draw away from these quiet mysteries, let us broaden our gaze once more, looking beyond the immediate confines of the monastery walls. For while the inner life was one of serene discipline, of ordered contemplation, the world outside was a vibrant, often turbulent tapestry of medieval existence, teeming with life, conflict, and change. A constant ebb and flow of human drama. It's a monastery, far from being entirely isolated, a hermetic bubble, played a crucial and often surprising role in the wider medieval world. Its influence extending in subtle but significant ways. Quiet anchor in a storm-tossed sea, a point of stability and light. Imagine yourself now, perched gently on the outer wall of our monastery, looking down into the bustling world beyond its protective ramparts. The sounds would be entirely different. The distant lowing of cattle in the fields, the shouts of peasants working the land, their voices carrying on the wind, the creak of wooden carts on a dirt track, perhaps the occasional clang of a blacksmith's hammer from a nearby village, crafting tools or shoes for horses, a rhythm of everyday life. This was the world of traders, with their pack horses laden with goods from distant lands, traveling along ancient, sometimes dangerous routes, bringing exotic spices and fabrics, of nobles resplendent in their colorful attire, perhaps on a hunting expedition with their hounds or en route to a feudal court, their retinue a flash of pomp and power. And of the vast majority of people, the peasants, whose lives were deeply intertwined with the rhythms of the agricultural year. Often a constant struggle for survival against famine, disease, and the unpredictable demands of their lords. The monastery's relationship with this surrounding community was multifaceted and vital. A complex web of interactions that shaped both the cloister and the common folk. Far from being entirely detached or self-contained, it was often a central pillar of the local landscape. Both physically and spiritually, an economic and social hub, a place of refuge and support. One of its most enduring roles was in charity and hospitality. Imagine weary travelers, perhaps pilgrims on a long journey to a distant shrine, their clothes dusty and worn, or impoverished villagers seeking aid during a harsh winter, their faces etched with hardship, arriving at the monastery gates. They would be met not with suspicion or judgment, but with a quiet, practiced welcome, a warmth born of Benedictine teaching. The monastery's guest house, or hospitium, would offer a simple meal and a safe, clean place to rest, free from the dangers of the open road or the harsh elements, a haven of peace. This was a core tenet of Benedictine hospitality, to welcome all as if they were Christ himself. A profound act of selfless service, a practical embodiment of their faith, the rhythm of their lives. For some monks, included the regular duty of receiving and caring for guests, a gentle act of outreach and service to the outside world. A constant reminder of their connection to humanity. Beyond direct charity, monasteries were often major landowners, holding vast tracts of fertile land, forests, and sometimes even entire villages, their influence stretching for miles. Agricultural practices, often more advanced than those of local peasants due to their greater resources. Organized labor and access to knowledge gleaned from ancient texts could sometimes serve as models for the surrounding community. They might introduce new crops, improve drainage systems, or manage forests sustainably for timber and game, demonstrating innovative techniques. The wealth generated from these lands, though often substantial, was not for personal enrichment, but for the sustenance of the monastic community, the maintenance of the buildings, the purchase of books and supplies, and the continuation of their charitable works, constantly being reinvested into the community, an economic engine for good. The monastery also served as a center of learning, extending its influence beyond its own walls. It's not merely preserving knowledge, but actively disseminating it. While Brother Thomas spent his days copying texts for the monastic library, some monasteries also ran schools for young boys, often destined for the church, but sometimes for noble families seeking an education for their sons in an age when public schools were non-existent. Here they would learn Latin, scripture, and the rudiments of mathematics and rhetoric, the foundations of classical learning, opening doors to a world of thought. Imagine the quiet murmuring of young voices reciting lessons, a stark contrast to the deeper, more sonorous tones of monastic chant, a blend of youthful energy and ancient wisdom. This gentle transmission of knowledge ensured that learning, though fragile, continued to spread, even in an age when formal education was rare and precious. A light in the darkness, a hope for the future. Furthermore, Monasteries often acted as local economic hubs, centers of skilled production and trade. They produced their own food, ale, wine, and crafts, sometimes trading surpluses with the surrounding villages or at local markets, acting as producers and consumers, stimulating local economies. They might have a mill for grinding grain, its great stones turning slowly, a forge for metalwork, its clang muted by thick stone walls, or even a specialized workshop producing textiles or pottery, contributing to the local economy with tangible goods. The rhythm of their lives, therefore, wasn't entirely insular. It had a practical economic resonance that linked them to the ebb and flow of regional commerce, subtle but undeniable interaction with the marketplace, a recognition of their place in the material world. This was another aspect of their constant struggle, the practical management of resources, ensuring the self-sufficiency of the community while contributing to the wider economy. A constant balancing act between spiritual ideals and earthly necessities. Spiritually, the monastery was a powerful presence, sacred landmark, its towering spires or humble bell tower visible for miles around. Local villagers would often attend services in the abbey church, particularly on high feast days, seeking solace, spiritual guidance, or simply to witness the beauty and solemnity of the liturgy. A brief escape from the harshness of daily life, a glimpse of heaven on earth. The monks, through their prayers and their exemplary lives, were believed to intercede with God on behalf of the wider community, acting as spiritual guardians, a living bridge between the people and the divine. Funerals, baptisms, and other significant life events for local gentry, or even some peasants, might take place within the abbey's sacred precincts, forging a deep spiritual connection between the cloister and the common folk, weaving their lives together in shared rituals. Sometimes the relationship between the monastery and the wider world was not always perfectly serene. Disputes could arise over land tithes or the precise boundaries of their influence, leading to legal battles or even minor skirmishes. For even spiritual institutions operated within the realities of temporal power. But even these conflicts, often resolved through negotiation or legal means, underscored the monastery's undeniable presence and power in medieval society. It was a delicate balance, a constant struggle between maintaining their cloistered purity and engaging with the practical realities of the secular world, a necessary negotiation of spiritual ideals and earthly demands. A constant dance between the sacred and the profane. The image of the monastery, therefore, transforms from a purely isolated spiritual haven into a dynamic, influential institution, a beacon of stability and learning in a world that was often tumultuous, certain, and dangerous. Its quiet routines, its dedicated individuals like Brother Thomas, its hidden mysteries, and its tangible artifacts all contributed to its profound impact on the social fabric, the intellectual landscape, and the spiritual life of medieval Europe. The rhythm of their lives lived within those walls, resonated far beyond them, shaping the world in countless subtle ways, a quiet force of change and continuity. As our quiet journey through the medieval monastery walls draws to a close, let us gently bring all these threads together. We began by imagining ourselves stepping into the hushed pre-dawn, feeling the cold stone, hearing the first deep tones of vigils, and witnessing the monks begin their day. We followed them through their days, observing the slow, steady rhythm of prayer and work, the subtle sense of herbs and parchment, the quiet determination that marked their existence, a living tapestry of devotion. We then focused our gaze on an individual, Brother Thomas, the quiet scribe, whose life of meticulous dedication embodied the profound, often unseen, contributions of monastic scholarship, preserving knowledge for generations. And we have just explored the subtle mysteries, the archaeological whispers, and the vibrant interaction these communities had with the wider medieval world. Contrasting the serene discipline within with the bustling, sometimes chaotic life beyond, imagine yourself now, standing once more outside those ancient walls, looking back at the monastery as the gentle twilight descends. The sounds of the medieval world outside have softened, fading into the distance, as if the world itself is preparing for rest, the day's labors drawing to a close. The monastery itself, its dark stone outlined against the deepening sky, seems to settle into a profound stillness, a place where time slows and quiet wisdom resides, a sentinel guarding the past. It is a powerful image of endurance, of continuity, a silent testament to lives lived with purpose, devotion, and an unhurried grace, echoing through the centuries.